Hello everyone, my name is Tish Tablan and I'm the National Outreach Director at Generation 180. So thank you for joining us for the Generation 180 Team Monthly Webinar for February 2018. For those of you joining us today for the first time, Generation 180 is a nonprofit organization based in Charlottesville, Virginia that is committed to accelerating a shift in energy awareness and clean energy adoption in households and communities throughout the country. We are doing this through the network of volunteer teams we are building across the country to take action in their own communities. Through this monthly webinar, our volunteer teams learn from guest speakers and experts in clean energy. They share challenges and successes with each other, and they build and practice skills to become effective community leaders. After the webinar is over, the teams will work together to take action, which for March is writing a letter to the editor. We are doing this through the network of volunteer teams we are building across the country to take action in their own communities. Through this monthly webinar, our volunteer teams learn from guest speakers and experts in clean energy. They share challenges and successes with each other, and they build and practice skills to become effective community leaders. After the webinar is over, the teams will work together to take action, and today we'll be continuing outreach to new school board members to advocate for solar. If you're considering joining or starting a Generation 180 team where you live, I hope you get an introduction to the type of skill building and empowerment that we provide our volunteers every month to help them be effective leaders and agents of change where they live. We hold the volunteer team webinars on the second Sunday of each month at 1:00 p.m. Eastern, and you can go to our website to find links to the video recording and podcasts of each webinar and to register for the next monthly webinar, which will be on Sunday, March 11 at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Let me quickly go over the agenda for a 1-hour webinar today. First, our guest speaker, Park Guthrie, will talk about Schools for Climate Action, the campaign he started, and he'll share his experience in moving school boards to break the spiral of silence and take climate action. After the presentation, we will have time to take questions from the audience. Next, we will hear a grassroots victory from the Charlottesville team, and then Sam Daly-Harris, CEO and founder of Civic Courage, will lead a training session on moving elected officials up the champion scale. I'd like to now introduce our first speaker, Park Guthrie, the founder of Schools for Climate Action, which is a nonpartisan, grassroots volunteer campaign with a mission to empower school boards to speak up for climate action in order to protect current and future students. I've been personally inspired by his passion and success in working with the school boards in California to pass climate resolutions. But before Park begins, I just want to note that all attendees will stay on mute during the presentation. If you have a question, please type your question into the box in your control panel, and you can do that anytime during the presentation. And at the end of the presentation, we'll call on people with questions. Thank you. Take it away, Park.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, everybody, thank you so much for being on this call, and thank you, Tish and Generation 180 for inviting me on the call. My name's Park Guthrie, and let me trying to advance. There I am. That's a picture of me with my two oldest kids, Kai, who's now 15, and Lola, who's 14. And that's a picture of us in Washington, D.C. last June, where we went to lobby with Citizens Climate Lobby. I've been a public school teacher for over 17 years in Northern California. I was an Army brat growing up. I've also worked as a landscape contractor, an Outward Bound instructor, and I started a school and community garden nonprofit called Urban Tilth, which is doing great work in Richmond, California. And I have 3 kids, and I'm married to Kristen Klingelhofer. So that's who I am. I want to give an overview today about Schools for Climate Action. I want to talk about the spiral of silence and why it's actually a great problem to have. I want to give some tips on working with school boards, and then I want to end with a call to action. Just a heads up, conventional wisdom says that for a 15 to 20 minute talk, you should have only about 15 to 20 slides. I couldn't quite get there. So buckle your seatbelts, and if I talk too fast, you can replay it on half speed. Um, I always like to start talking about who I am speaking up for. And so that's a picture of my family. That's me, the youngest one at the bottom, and this is in the early 70s. I was an Army brat growing up, and both my parents were also Army brats. And so it's a pretty important and emotionally complex time in the early 70s. I was born 9 months after my dad came back from Vietnam. There's me with my three kids. The quick story behind this is Kai and Lola were the lead lobby members of a carbon fee and dividend endorsement by our County Board of Supervisors. And the county board enthusiastically endorsed and asked them to come in to receive the gold resolution. And tragically and ironically, we're in Sonoma County, and the day we were to come in was the second day of the Sonoma fires. And so the face masks were definitely not contrived. They were necessary at that moment. And lastly, I'm speaking up for my youngest nephew, Mo, and I'll come back to him at the end. I also just want to put it out there. My intentions are to be respectful and positive and as Gandhian as I can be. It's a high bar, but that's my intention. Okay, so I'm going to, Schools for Climate Action started when we came back from that June CCL lobby meeting. And for years, I had been trying to get my school district to take a stand on climate action in order to protect current and future students. And I hadn't gotten very far with them, but we decided to actually work with the school district where I live. So we came back from DC. We formed a youth adult team that included my own children and a couple children who were a couple youth at a local high school. And we sent some emails and we set up a meeting with our most likely school board champion. So we met with an individual school board member, and it was just me and two youth. And we proposed a resolution calling for climate action, so an endorsement of climate action. We followed that up in August with some emails, and we met with two more individual school board members. In September, a youth adult team presented at a school board meeting. October, November, everything was pretty crazy around here due to the fires, but lo and behold, December 4th, our resolution passed. And at the time, it was likely the strongest statement on the need for climate action in order to protect current and future students by any school board in the country. And I'll talk a little bit more later about why that's significant. And there's Kaya W., a senior, and you can see the school board members are delighted to have a youth speak. And there's Joey T. He's an 8th grader in the Sebastopol Union School District. And just some language from that resolution. Some of it's soft language that's going to shift paradigms and change paradigms. Climate change is a children's issue. All leaders, all elected leaders should be taking action on climate change. It also has kind of action items that I think should be really interesting to Generation 180 folks. It creates a district climate change committee that's meeting monthly and is going to make follow-on recommendations to the board, including the ones I highlighted in orange, I think are most relevant to Generation 180 folks. So, you know, we were just absolutely thrilled with this, this success. And we've been very surprised at how quickly, less than 6 weeks later, another local school district passed the same resolution with actually no direct advocacy from us. So let me just talk a little bit about the spiral of silence and school boards. The spiral of silence is a theory that was developed in the 70s that tries to explain a situation in which a majority of people can hold a common belief, but they hold it privately, and the perception of the prevailing public opinion might actually be contrary to this private belief that the majority of the people actually hold. So Andy Leiserowitz and the great folks at the Yale program on climate change communication recognized a spiral of silence related to climate change. Essentially, half of Americans are interested or think global warming is very important, yet in 2016, they rarely or never talked about it. And as a school teacher and a member of an institution that exists to create great outcomes, great future outcomes for children, I see this spiral of silence. There's two numbers up on the screen right now, 90,000 and 168,000. There are 90,000 school board members in the country. These are the only elected leaders with a singular focus on children and creating great futures for children. These are people that have committed enormous amounts of time volunteering for their communities to create great schools for kids. And yet, I searched all over. Very few school board members have taken an official stand on the need for climate action to protect these children that they spend so much time working for. 168,000 are just the number of school board meetings in the country. And I just imagine the word cloud of every word spoken in school board meetings. And again, this is official public discourse of people with a singular focus on this next generation, the generation that will bear any burden of our inaction on climate change. And very, very few times will you even see the word climate change mentioned. So I think this is a spiral of silence effect for sure. So this is our graph of 90,000 school board members. As far as we can tell, 45 have officially spoken up. And I just want to say, it's not because they're not great people. They really are great community members, awesome Americans, loving, compassionate adults. We just haven't found the precedent and the language for them to use. And I suspect that there is a vast untapped potential. If we can provide school board members, okay, I'm trying to advance my screen here. Oh, there we go. Anyhow, the gap between the 45 who have officially spoken up and the 90,000 who may not yet have officially spoken up is huge. And we think there is a vast untapped potential. So at Schools for Climate Action, we're trying to support youth adult teams to go ahead and release this potential. And in the process, you should know that it is very, very empowering for the youth members to speak in front of a school board. And something really amazing happens when youth stand up in these official public forums. The school board members and all adults there are touched and moved and experience paradigm shifts that eventually will build to science-based climate policies, we hope. Okay, and so just one quick example of having broken the spiral of silence locally by school boards on climate change. Sonoma County Office of Education Board just passed a commitment to climate change resolution on February 1st. And we used a very similar advocacy strategy. There's the youth adult team. We had just met with the president, Herman Hernandez, but we forgot to take a picture. So be better about taking pictures than we've been. There's Lola at the school board meeting just 1 week later. And this was 2 months ahead of our planned schedule. They passed a school board resolution that included a carbon pricing mention and encouraged local school districts to engage in nonpartisan advocacy to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we think this is now the strongest statement. It eclipsed Sebastopol unions, and we're just absolutely thrilled with it. Okay, so just thinking about the spiral of silence and the time we invested to break the spiral of silence. I don't know if you can see the mini stopwatch there, but it actually took relatively little time to break the spiral of silence on the need for climate action. So we think it's a relatively good problem to have. I just want to put a plug out for everyone doing this kind of work. Danella Meadows' Thinking in Systems book, especially the Leverage Points chapter, really is important. It has been important for me. Okay, a little bit more about school board resolutions. School board leaders, school board members are grass tops leaders, and it's a huge cohort that could be activated in our effort to enact science-based climate policies. It's a really easy way to engage youth in climate activism and advocacy. Schools need to be speaking up on climate change, because remaining silent undermines our institutional coherence. All of the messages we want to send kids, that adults take care of the big things, that we need to show responsibility, that we have to pick up after ourselves, all of those values are undermined by silence on the need for climate action. So there's a little bit more about school boards. I think I've covered this. So in terms of replicating our process, so now I'm just going to give you some pointers on working with school boards. Think about forming teams that include multi-stakeholders. So there's sort of a hierarchy of school district stakeholders, and the students are definitely at the top of that hierarchy, and then parents, followed by teachers and school staff, and constituents and community members. So I really encourage you, if you're going to work with school districts and school boards, form a multi-stakeholder team and make sure there's youth. And as much as possible, include youth at every meeting that you have with school district folks. You can't always do it, but shoot for that. I also really encourage you to include CCL members or Generation 180 members or Schools for Climate Action members, or just other community members with experience in this Gandhian type lobbying or advocacy. It is so important that that we stay positive and we build positive relationships, and that we view everyone, even people who disagree with us, as potential future allies and worthy human beings. And that's a high bar, but our work is worth it. At school board meetings, there is nothing that moves school board members more than having youth come. They rarely get youth come, and most of the people who speak at school board meetings are unfortunately frustrated and angry. So a respectful, articulate, positive youth is just a breath of fresh air. Active youth are terribly overscheduled. So if you want to get them engaged, try to get a big pool of youth, and sometimes you'll just have to scaffold things. The adults may have to set the meetings and send the reminders, and then, you know, if you invite 3 youth to come, and hopefully at least one of them won't have basketball practice or a big homework assignment the night that they're scheduled to speak. And just as you work with school boards, these school board members are volunteers. They work all day, and then often they're handed a board packet that is hundreds of pages long, that's got an incredible number of spreadsheets. Most of what they're asked to make decisions about is actually quite boring. It's policy stuff. It's budget minutia. They don't have a staff like other politicians. They're not paid. So it's good to keep in mind that when we present to school board members, we really need to appreciate them for their time, their commitment to the community, and we just can't let ourselves get in a place where we convey anger or frustration when when we're working with them. And just as Generation 180 members, I really encourage you to hit these links and check out San Diego Union School District, or San Francisco's Carbon Neutral Schools Resolution and San Diego Unified's 100% renewable by 2035 resolution. Those are amazing resolutions and very relevant to your work. Okay, so just to close now, I just want you to think about the difference. There's Mo. By the time that he is my youngest daughter's June's age, so when he's 11, think about this, the way my children learned the story of climate change, and how I could not give them an answer about why we're allowing this to happen as adults. And just imagine the possibility, if we do our work and we get it done, Mo is going to turn 10 and it's going to be such a different story. And there's a whole bunch of grief and loss that he won't have to face because, you know, all the good people at CCL and Generation 180 and all Americans are going to step up to this challenge. So I just want to go back and close. This photo was taken probably a year after my godfather, Pete Benson, was killed in Vietnam, and he was one of the last 50 Americans killed. And I don't remember him, but I saw the legacy of grief in my parents, and I also saw that they were mistreated by many Americans for their service. And I saw this amazing resilience and faith in our country. And, you know, despite all of their sacrifices and the hardships they faced, they loved America and they loved our democratic process, warts and all. And they had faith in it, and they have faith in it. And having seen this kind of inspirational leadership, I know that we are not a people who will back down from this challenge. We can lead the world, and we can step up on this challenge of meeting climate change. So as Americans, we share a great heritage and an inspirational history, and we just need to draw on that, because we are not, I am not gonna be the ones that back down from this. So thank you very much for listening, and time for Q&A.
Thank you so much for that presentation and just for sharing your personal experience, your successes out in California, and just your insight into how to best work with school boards and how to involve young people. I'd love to open it up for questions. We have, you know, a few minutes for questions. So I have people here in the room with me, and I also have people online. So if you're an online attendee, you can actually type a question into the question box in the control panel that you see, and I will be able to see your question and call on you. And when I call on you, then you can unmute yourself and ask your question. So I will open it up and see if there are any questions in the question box, or here in the room with me in Charlottesville, Virginia. Does anyone have any questions for Park? Okay, so Park, while we're waiting on, oh, here we go. So Joe Jordan, let me unmute you, please, and you can ask your question.
Hi.
Go ahead, Joe.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. There was some song, I forget who did it, said, "How long has this been going on?" Anyway, I just found out about this via an email from Park. I'm a CCLer in Santa Cruz, which now has a mushrooming contingent. I don't know, 100 official members, maybe 30 active, but so this is the first one of these I've seen, and Park is definitely a kindred spirit. I've done a whole lot in this community and beyond to solarize schools, and I'm a little impatient with resolutions. I mean, they're great, and we just got the Santa Cruz City Council to do a resolution endorsing carbon fee and dividend, which is great. But I, I want to get solar out there and actually highlight the reason why we're doing it, other than just saving money and all that. Get the students educated and the teachers in the schools and the staff that, hey, this is something going on at our school, and here's what it's helping to do in the world and for the future of everybody. But so maybe you've been doing this for a year and I just didn't know about it, or it looks like this is a part of an ongoing series. Anyway, I really encourage it. It's really cool, and I'm glad I was able to catch it this morning. I'm also glad it's short because, as I emailed earlier on the chat there, I'm doing this national global radio show, which we've done 57 of them. We've done it for over a year now. It's called Planet Watch Radio. I keep meaning to announce this to the whole NorCal CCL or even the national. It's all about science and nature, climate and energy, technology and environment, truth and action, and the future of the world. Will be airing today, 2 to 3 p.m. live, PST, California time,
Hey,
at
Joe.
planetwatchradio.com. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just jump in and just address just a couple points? Thank you very much for the question. And one, I just wanted to encourage you to learn more about Generation 180, because it sounds like they're really trying to build out the energy side of kind of all the CCL type efforts. So I think, if you're interested in solar, definitely check, sign up for Generation 180 stuff. And then in terms of frustration with resolutions, that is a really understandable position, and it makes sense in some ways. I just wanted to put a explanation about why these things are important. So there's really sort of three reasons that I see. One is that these resolutions, we can get them in the hands of CCL lobby teams, and they are, political gold currency. And literally, it may not make as much sense in districts represented by members of Congress who are already engaged in climate action, but it becomes very, very valuable if we can set a precedent and share our templates and share this language in places where it might be easy to pass a resolution like this. When we get resolutions in districts whose members of Congress are not engaged in climate action, and so this has happened up in Lake Tahoe since we've started this campaign, partly because of pre-existing efforts, but partly because of our efforts. There are now 2 school boards in Representative McClintock's district, for example, that have language saying climate change is a children's issue. So thinking about going in and engaging with his office and him, these are really, really valuable resolutions. The second thing, the Sebastopol Union resolution creates a climate change committee to make actionable recommendations to the school board about things like facilities and operations and curriculum and educational opportunities. So these climate change committees provide a natural channel for Generation 180 folks or CCL folks to plug into school districts and start influencing the institutional culture there. And then the last reason is really just Donella Meadows says she looks at 12 different leverage points in complex systems, and changing paradigms is the most effective leverage point. And just getting a youth standing in front of a school board explaining why climate change is a generational justice issue goes a long way to help change paradigms.
Yeah, I think you're totally right on all that stuff. And I have to say, I spoke a little too exaggeratedly. I think resolutions are necessary but not sufficient. The part I get impatient with is that I see people being all thrilled and patting themselves on the back too much, that, okay, we got this wonderful resolution. Well, that's just a start. Okay, if you can't get a resolution, then you're not going to get anywhere else either. So totally agree. And I was going to ask what Generation 180 means. My theory is that it means, hey, we're going in one direction and we kind of need to do an about face and not only stop emitting carbon but get it out of the atmosphere big time while we're at it. Is that something?
Well, I just encourage you to learn more about Generation 180, because I do know that it is also influenced by the Citizens Climate Lobby approach, which I think is really, really valuable. And I see them as sort of being the natural partners to do exactly what you're talking about. Like CCL or Schools for Climate Action can maybe create a bow wave where we've got this sense of urgency. We were speaking publicly about, the loss that we're going to face if we don't get it into gear, and Generation 180 is helping build out the clean energy infrastructure. So I think they're a really logical ally and partner for our work.
And let me just ask you, or did I hear correctly that you're in? Are you in Thomas Jeffersonville there, Middle Virginia, Northern Virginia?
Yes, we are. This is Tish Tablan. I'm going to have to wrap up the Q&A right now, but Park, thank you for the plug for Generation 180, and Joe, thank you for your question. We are based in Charlottesville, Virginia. And
I'm from Virginia myself originally.
Excellent. Well, good. Well, thank you for your question, and good luck on your interview later.
ZBSradio.com.
Great. Thank you. Great. Well, Park, I'm going to have to wrap it up here, but thank you so much for your questions. I just have one follow-up question, and in your campaign kind of related to what Joe asked. I know you have a goal for a number of resolutions, and then do you have some part of your campaign as to what's next, or how to continue with that follow-through with some of these school districts?
Well, we're primarily focused on supporting youth adult teams to get school board climate action resolutions, and we don't see ourselves as having the capacity to necessarily do all the follow-up with the school boards. We're hoping that if they set up these climate change committees, they have sort of the knowledge, and they can set up this process where outside groups can plug into them, and just with the resources within the districts, they can start shifting the institutions more towards addressing climate change.
Right.
Yeah. So our focus is
like mostly the paradigm shift. Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Park. I think that was really informative and insightful what you had to share, and I know our teams here will be thinking and talking about what you had to say today as we kind of move forward in our campaign to work with schools nationwide to go solar. So I'll circle back. Let me see if I can get the presentation sharing to work this time.
And also, just if anyone has questions or wants advice, feel free to reach out.
As Joe requested, I'll give a quick summary of our Solar Schools campaign that we're doing nationwide. And this is why I was happy to have Park as our speaker today, so we can share some insight and experience into his own campaign to advance climate action in California and other places around the country. For those of you who are new to Generation 180 and new to this call, last November, we launched a Solar Schools campaign, and part of that campaign, we released a nationwide study on solar schools, and we did this in partnership with the Solar Energy Industries Association and the Solar Foundation. So you can find that report on our website. But moving forward, we also are launching volunteer teams across the country to help with the implementation and build the momentum for schools to go solar around the country. So we've started with a team in Charlottesville, Virginia last November, and within a few weeks, our team had reached out to school board members and were able to secure a meeting with the chair of the school board in the city of Charlottesville, with the COO and environmental manager in Albemarle County. And just recently, we had another meeting with the Environmental Sustainability Office for the city to get deeper into understanding what's possible and available for solar in the city schools. And so next, we're going to actually have share a grassroots victory from our local team. So I have Bill Lankford and Isabel Getz are going to share an update on our recent meeting with the city of Charlottesville. So I'm going to invite you both to come up here so everyone can hear you.
Tish, be happy to give an update from Charlottesville. As part of our efforts to promote more solar electricity panels on the public schools here, the team of Generation 180 had its second meeting with our city officials on January 26th. We were following up on suggestions from our first meeting was with the city school board chair, Juan Diego Wade. We met with Crystal Rodervold, Environmental Sustainability Manager, Susan Elliott, who's the Climate Protection Program Coordinator, and both of them are staff members of the Environmental Sustainability Division of the City of Charlottesville. Very formal titles, but wonderful people. It was a very satisfying meeting. They were happy to have people from the community who were interested in their work to come to see them, and were glad to talk to us about their efforts and the obstacles they were facing. They especially appreciated Gen 180's approach of offering them support for their work, and were impressed by the wealth of solid research we could offer. In addition to being very helpful, all the data and the impressive graphics ensured that we were taken very seriously. We pointed out that the City of Charlottesville has made great strides in improving energy efficiency throughout our public buildings, but so far the minimal solar installations on our schools were results of happenstance or spillover from other programs. To get something more substantial going, they explained how the system works and what the timeframes were and how we could get involved. Crystal and Susan consider themselves as in-house consultants for the environmental sustainability of the city. Crystal said that they've had consistently really good support from elected leaders and senior management, but a lot of what they accomplish is dependent on community actions and community behavior. In the last 10 or 15 years, they have seen much higher awareness of environmental issues from the public. There's not been a directive from the public schools to look at solar or more green building standards for school buildings. Crystal and Susan think the timing is really good to push for solar schools in Charlottesville, especially since some of the things that are going to be triggered by our city's climate plan. And so working across these various agencies is going to be very important. She recommends that it'll be really important to include any of our proposals and how this impacts students positively. Once again, getting the young people and the students involved. So it's clear to me that Generation 180's key strategy of combining advocacy with support has great promise. I would encourage anyone interested in this important subject of solar energy to consider joining a Gen 1 Nation team and participate in this community of people who care about the future and want to make a positive contribution. This feels like a good place to be working. Thank you, Jess.
Hi, I'm Isabel Getz. I also attended the meeting with Crystal and Susan from the Environmental Sustainability Division. And I also wanted to kind of share what it was like for me personally to attend this meeting. Crystal and Susan are both incredibly knowledgeable, and speaking with them gave me a much better idea about how local government works and how sustainability initiatives can kind of originate in the community and then be translated into how the government implements programs. Going into the meeting, I was definitely a bit nervous because I had never attended something so official before. I had contacted city officials via letter or email, but I had never actually met in person with government officials. So to anyone else who maybe feels the same way, that like attending a meeting like this is a little bit nerve-wracking or intimidating, I would definitely encourage you to do so. Even if you're not the person who's doing all the talking, you can still get a lot out of the meeting. One great part about attending this meeting for me was that it put faces to the name of local government. As a volunteer at Gen 180, I'm often thinking about big groups like the community or the local government, which can seem kind of vague, which makes our goals seem a little bit vague as well. But meeting these people in person really made me realize that the stakeholders in our programs are real people, and they're willing to help, and they're knowledgeable. So that was a big takeaway for me. And something I was really glad to learn was that a lot of the information that the school districts need in order to move forward with solar is really already out there. For instance, the Environmental Sustainability Division has a lot of resources about financing and PPAs and roof quality. Therefore, getting more solar on schools is more so a matter of acting on what is already known, and I found that very encouraging. This meeting made me feel very optimistic that Gen 180 is well positioned as a catalyst to support the schools in making these changes. I think this was one of my favorite things I've done with Gen 180 so far was attend this meeting because it helped me see that our campaign has really made progress and that our end goal is achievable. So I would just encourage anyone else, we started out kind of the same way that Park was describing. We just wrote a letter to the school board members, and then they contacted us and we set up a meeting, and it really was quite simple, and we really were able to get our program up on its feet pretty quickly. So I would definitely encourage everyone to participate in local action as much as they can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill and Isabel, for sharing what's going on in Charlottesville. Like I said, we've made a lot of progress in just a few short months, and we are working on launching teams in Washington, D.C., New York City, Richmond, Virginia, and Atlanta over the next couple months. So we're excited to start seeing some of this spread out to other communities across the country as we advance our campaign and as Generation 180 continues to grow. So next, we are very fortunate to have Sam Daly Harris do a training for our group. He is the CEO and founder of Civic Courage. He's the founder of a nonprofit organization called Results. And he's also the author of Reclaiming Our Democracy. And as Park had alluded to, Sam is also the architect of this volunteer model that Citizens Climate Lobby follows, that Schools for Climate Action uses, and that Generation 180 uses as well. So I will hand it over to Sam and let him talk about the champion scale and explain what that is.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Presentation, and then start getting some Q&A going. Thanks to everyone who's on the call. I'm really inspired by what you've been doing in Charlottesville in just about 12 or 13 weeks. I want to go over what I refer to as the champion scale and talk about the fact that we don't just want our school board members, school district staff, or other stakeholders like principals, teachers, students, and parents to just support solar schools. We want them to advocate for solar schools. We want them to be leaders for solar schools, and eventually we want them to be champions for solar schools. So let me say it another way. It seems to happen to me all the time. I talk with a group of volunteers from any organization, and they might say, well, my member of Congress is so good on this, I don't need to meet with her. Or my member of Congress is so bad, meeting with him is a waste of time. The Charlottesville Generation 180 team clearly isn't saying that with the 3 key meetings in about 12 weeks. But I'd like to give a context for those meetings and a way forward. I think we can agree that the farthest you can get from being a champion for solar schools is being opposed. A school board member or other local official who's opposed might say, I don't support that, or I can't justify the cost, or my constituents wouldn't support that, or what you're talking about isn't even a problem, or I agree it's a problem, but I can't support your solution. The next level up from opposed is neutral or uninformed. So we would want to move someone who's opposed. I don't know that we've got any of those that we bumped into yet, up to at least neutral. Someone who's neutral might say, I need more information. Can you explain it to me more fully? Or could you give me reading materials so I can make a more informed decision? The next level up from neutral is a supporter. A supporter might say, I'll support that. I think it's a good idea, or I can get behind it. Now, this is where a lot of groups stop, getting their officials to support their initiative. But we want to go further than that. The next level up from supporter is an advocate. An advocate might say, now that I support this, I think it's important to build more support. I'm going to talk to other members of the school board about getting behind it. Or, do you think you could help me draft an op-ed for our local paper so we can educate the community? The next level up from advocate is a leader and spokesperson. A leader might be the lead sponsor of a resolution on solar schools, or the lead sponsor of a budget line item for expanding the number of solar schools. The final level is champion. And I don't like it when groups cheapen the term champion by calling anyone who does anything good a champion. A champion is someone who's so passionate that they're out in front of Generation 180 and pushing Generation 180 to catch up. I don't know if we've got any champions yet. They might say, I've arranged for a plenary session and 2 workshops on solar schools at the National School Board Association Conference, and I need your help in finding speakers for those sessions and in following up with school board officials who express interest. Or they might say, I'm gathering signatures on a letter to the U.S. Secretaries of Education and Energy asking for a meeting with them to discuss accelerating the expansion of solar schools nationwide. And while I think I can get dozens of school board chairs to sign the letters, I'd like your help in getting letters to the editor published urging the U.S. Secretaries of Education and Energy to meet with us. So I'm going to ask you some questions about the meetings you've had, but is there anyone who'd like to ask a question about anything I've said before I ask you some questions? So you could write in the chat box that you have a question and Tish will call on you. And I'm going to ask you to please give your name and city when you begin. And Tish, let me know if you've got anyone who has a question on any of the things I've said so far before I go to my next questions.
No questions for now, Sam.
Okay, great. So good. I have a question, and my question is this. For someone who's been to one or more of the meetings with the county or city school board or city officials, the question is, would someone be willing to say where you think one of the officials you met with is? Maybe I think she's a real supporter or whatever. Or if you're not sure where they are, I'd like you to say, tell us what you know about them, and maybe we can figure out together where they are. Who would like to speak who is at one of the or more of the 3 meetings Generation 180's already had, and would like to take a shot at, we've got a real advocate, and I say he's an advocate or she's an advocate because of these things. And, I think this is what we might do to move them from advocate up to leader. So do we have someone who'd be willing to, or you don't know, you really want an open discussion about, I'm not sure where, Juan Diego is, is he neutral? Is he a cautious supporter? Is he, and I don't mean him in particular, but anyone who's been to any, who do we got?
Well, we have, I'll have to invite someone to come up closer to the microphone to make that happen. Give me a minute to recruit someone up to the front of the room to closer to the mic so everyone can hear.
Okay. Your name and city. I think I know the city.
I'm in Charlottesville. I'm one of the team leaders with Generation 180 here, and I attended the meeting, the county solar schools meeting, with Lindsay Snoddy and Dean, I forgot his last name, Tisdale. And she is, I believe, the facilities manager for the county, and he is COO. Okay, so thank you, Tish. And I would definitely, I think she is probably an advocate or a leader spokesperson, maybe. It's hard to say. I don't know if she's a champion just because of her role at the local level.
So can I interrupt for 1 second? If she were a champion, she would be pestering Tish all the time for Generation 180 to kind of step it up and take a new action and move forward. So I'm guessing that she's not quite a champion because I don't think she's pestering Tish all the time about moving faster. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I agree. I think she's not a champion, but probably definitely an advocate. It's hard to say
Great.
because a ton of institutional knowledge. She taught us, I think, more than we knew about solar schools. She understands the financing process, what it takes to get it done in a school setting, how to work with school board members. So she understood what the schools needed, and she's supportive of that. So maybe between an advocate and maybe we could get her to be a leader or spokesperson.
And if I could just say, sometimes people, of course, or maybe lots of times, people move up and do something that's leadership in nature, and then they kind of move back down to even being a supporter and or a hiding out supporter. So it's not necessarily so that someone takes a leadership action and then stays a leader. They might just kind of move on to other things or whatever. So you would say at some level she's clearly an advocate. Yes, you would say that?
I think well, she's overseeing a major clean energy retrofit at the schools involving LED lights and low flush toilets. So on the whole clean energy efficiency front, I would say she's an advocate or a leader.
Yeah, okay, great. And we don't need to get too technical on this. So let's say she's shows some leadership, you know, and or is leader from time to time. What would you say, and we'll kind of close it with this, what would you say you could do, not you personally only, but the team could do to bolster her leadership, to encourage her leadership, to expand her leadership? Any guesses as some actions you could take and things you could do that could strengthen her leadership?
Well, when we met with them, Dean and Lindsay, she said that the biggest obstacle to expanding solar schools in the county was finding the right financing options. And I think we offered to, bring her those resources.
Okay.
Look for put her in touch with local solar companies like Segura, for example. So I think that is one thing that we've already started to do, and if we can do that successfully, can move her up the list.
Perfect. So she said, I've got a need, and if we can somehow help fulfill that need, that would be really significant. Great. Let's do one other quick one, and then I'll throw out a few, and then we'll just close this off. You have any other thoughts, or anyone who is in the meeting with you have some thoughts on other things? So if you could come in somehow with access to resources that she said was a missing ingredient, that would be one way to bolster your relationship with her and her leadership. What else? You or anyone else who was in that meeting in Charlottesville? Well, let me throw some things out. I think you gave the most important one in terms of where the rubber meets the road. I'll just throw out a couple. So one question is, after we met with her, did we write a letter thanking her for taking the time and all that we learned and her commitment? Number one. Number two, did we write, it was the chair of the Albemarle County Schools who recommended that we meet with her and introduced us to her. So did we write the chair of the board, maybe with a CC to her, saying how great the meeting was and how you're grateful that you were introduced to her and that the amazing things that she's up to and the next steps that she laid out, kind of thing? Another is, and I know some of us have written some, but letters to the editor that really acknowledge the territory that's being taken and the need for community support to go even further, kind of thing. So these are little other examples of, in the ones I'm giving, we haven't brought the money in, but we're staying in the game and we're letting her know that we appreciate what she's doing and what she's up to. So hopefully you got a good sense of someone's opposed, we're not done. They move up to neutral, we're not done. They become a supporter, we're not done. They're now an advocate, that's great, we're not done. They're a leader, we're not done. Eventually, they become a champion. It's kind of like if Sandy Reisky, the founder of Generation 180, was the chairman of the city school board, he might be headed toward being a champion on this kind of thing, or some of you actually. So hopefully this was useful and a good way to look at upcoming meetings and upcoming actions to move the officials we're meeting with up the champion scale. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work. Back to you, Tish.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate that. And that is something from last month that we worked on. Someone in the room spoke up, but you couldn't hear them, that we are working on letters to the editor to acknowledge the people we're working with and get some positive recognition for those people who are doing great work in advancing solar in our community already, and hopefully keep escalating them up to the champion level. Great, so we're actually going to wrap it up. So thank you to both of our speakers, Park Guthrie and Sam Daly-Harris, for sharing all of your expertise and insight with us. I do want to wrap up and just share a couple of upcoming events that Generation 180 is hosting. So again, we are working on starting more teams around the country. We have 2 events in February. On February 1st, we have an event in Washington, D.C., and on February 22nd, we have an event in New York City. And these are just general information sessions to introduce Generation 180 to the community and our work to advance clean energy and accelerate energy awareness. So if you have colleagues, friends who live in these communities, or you have channels to spread the word, please do so. You can find this on our website. You can register there. Also, our monthly webinar for next month will be March 11, and they're always the second Sunday of the month, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And so our guest speaker next month is Kathy Lynn. She's the Energy Manager and Stormwater Program Administrator for Arlington Public Schools. And so she will be talking about Discovery Elementary School, which is shown here in this photo. And Discovery is one of a small number of net zero energy schools in the country. And since the school is open, they've really been a net energy producer. And so she will be talking about her experience managing that school and what we can learn from the success they've had with Discovery Elementary. Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for joining. You can listen to the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel, so you can just search for Generation 180's YouTube channel. You can also find all of those links on our website at generation180.org/volunteer. Thank you all.